College sports just blew up the rule book. For the first time ever, schools can pay athletes directly, millions of dollars straight from the athletic department. What does that mean for your favorite team, your favorite sport, in the future of college athletics? What's up, guys? Back for another video. This one a bit different topic-wise. I typically talk about more politically focused stories or legal focused stories, but my other love is college sports, and all this change happened because of a legal ruling. So I've got to talk about this new ruling that colleges can pay students directly. So this is really a total overhaul of college athletics, and not just because of direct payment. So the big storyline you're going to hear is that schools can now pay athletes 22% of their average annual athletic revenue, up to a total of $20.5 million. This is the revenue sharing model you've probably heard about many times over the past few years. Many people have been asking for this type of model. But the changes aren't ending there. First, this 22% or $20.5 million is for all athletes across all sports, meaning that North Carolina couldn't pay $20.5 million to football and then turn around and pay $20.5 million to basketball players. This is the total pot for all athletes: basketball, football, baseball, softball, volleyball, track and field, swimming, equestrian, whatever sport you can think of. $20.5 million or 22% is the limit. But the money doesn't have to be doled out equally among the sports. Schools can pick and choose which sports and which athletes to give the money to. So most schools are probably going to focus on football and basketball. So the NCAA is also totally revamping the scholarship system. So in the past, each sport had a specific number of scholarships to be divided between the athletes in that sport. So, for example, baseball teams had to divvy up 11.7 scholarships among the entire team. Football had a limit of 85 scholarships. Now, every athlete in every sport can be given a scholarship, but there are roster limits in place. So, before, a school like Nebraska could have 150 guys on their football team, but now they'll be limited to 105 players total. And that means that they could give out 105 full scholarships rather than the 85 they could give out previously. But what does this all mean? How is this actually going to change college athletics? So I'm going to start with this new roster limit. This is mostly going to be a big change in football. So for Nebraska fans like me, we know that Nebraska is real proud of their walk-on program. There are a ton of Nebraska high schoolers that aren't quite good enough to get a scholarship, but they come to Nebraska, try out for the team, make it, get on the field, sometimes become stars, and become a fan favorite. That era is probably over. Now, with the roster limits, teams won't be able to take these extra walk-on players. We'll probably end up with nearly all of the roster spots being taken up by players with full scholarships. But on the flip side, there are 20 more scholarships you can give out. And so while there will be less walk-ons, there'll be more athletes with scholarships, so you get a little bit of a trade-off there. With the revenue sharing, I want to make one thing clear. It's 22% of the athletic department revenue, or $20.5 million, whichever is less. So let's say that Akron brings in about $45 million. They could only pay athletes a total of $10 million, while a school like Alabama, say, brings in $500 million, they would be limited only to $20.5 million. So this $20.5 million will increase year over year, probably by about 4%. But what does this actually mean for sports? And it really means that the differences between the haves and the have-nots in college athletics will continue to grow. But at the same time, pretty much all of the power schools will be on an equal level, assuming that they bring in at least $93 million. So a school like Florida, with a revenue of $200 million last year, will have the same cap, $20.5 million, as a school like Purdue, who brought in only $134 million last year. Now, is every school going to pay the maximum amount to athletes? That remains to be seen, but they will have the option to do so. So in essence, this will equalize the playing field between the power schools, while the group of 5 in mid-majors will be left behind. Now, one thing that I find interesting is that schools have total control on how to dole this money out. So in theory, a school could choose to become a powerhouse in any sport of their liking. So Coastal Carolina, they're playing in the Super Regionals right now in baseball. They have $45 million in revenue last year. They could, in theory, spend all of their money on baseball players. If they did that, they would likely get their pick of the best high school players in the country. They would have a huge advantage over schools that focus on football and basketball. But if you noticed, I kept saying they could spend all their money on one sport in theory, because in reality, Title IX issues would likely come up, and they'd be forced to spend at least some of that money on women athletes as well. And speaking of Title IX, I think that's going to end up being a major issue for schools down the line. So right now, because of Title IX, schools are required to provide equal access to men's and women's sports. They have to provide athletic opportunities for men and women that are substantially proportional to the group's share of the undergraduate population, and then offer men's and women's athletes the same benefits. So, a school like Minnesota, 57% of their enrollment is women. And so 57% of their athletic roster spots have to go to women. With traditional NIL, Title IX didn't really become an issue because athletes were making deals with private third parties. But now that they're being paid directly by the school, I wouldn't be surprised if some judge somewhere ruled that because of Title IX, schools have to pay men and women equally or proportional to their undergraduate enrollment. So Minnesota, with 57% enrollment, may end up 57% enrollment being women, may have to end up paying 57% of their revenue share to women. Now, that would be kind of a worst case scenario for schools, and I don't know if that would happen because obviously the men's sports bring in more than the women's sports do. So I don't know if the Title IX ruling would look exactly like that, what I just laid out, but I'm sure that there will be a Title IX ruling about the revenue share sometime in the future. And speaking of NIL money received does not go towards the 22% revenue share or the $20.5 million paid to players. So athletes are free to make deals with third parties. But what's interesting about this is that now NIL deals will have much more oversight. All NIL deals over $600 will be subject to a review by a new clearinghouse called NIL Go, which will be managed by Deloitte. The goal of this clearinghouse is to ensure that athletes are not getting pay-for-play disguised as NIL. So to me, this spells a big change to the collectives that have been operating separate from the athletic departments. These collectives were third-party companies created for the sole purpose of paying athletes to come play for the school. Because it wasn't directly tied to the school, it could be considered an NIL deal. But now the NIL deals are subject to review. This means, to me, that collectives will have to change how they operate and how they do deals. No longer will Tennessee be able to just shell out $1 million for one player to come play for their school. Now there must be some name, image, and likeness tied to that deal. Now, this could be as simple as the collective putting the guy's face on a billboard or selling a jersey with his name on it. But the bottom line is that the NIL collectives will probably have to change how they operate. So I tried to hit on the most notable things that came with this new legislation. That's not all the changes coming, but I think those are the big ones. So I don't know exactly what's going to happen in the future, but one thing is for sure, and that's that college sports will never be the same. The money's flowing, the rules are changing, and the battles on the field and in the courtroom are just getting started. So buckle up. The new era of college athletics is here. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and I'll see you next time.